It was supposed to be just another quiet afternoon in the warehouse district. Grey skies, cracked sidewalks, the occasional rumble of an idling delivery truck echoing through the narrow alleyways. The kind of place where nobody looked too close, and nobody asked too many questions. That's what made it perfect for him. Cody wasn't the leader of his biker crew, but he was definitely the loudest. Mid-30s, beard down to his chest, with a leather vest 2 sizes too small and a chip on his shoulder big enough to crush someone's spine. He thrived on attention, craved the laugh, the dare, the "yo, bro, that was insane" kind of validation. He was always looking for an audience, even if the joke wasn't funny to anyone but himself. He rode into the alley, revving his engine like it was an announcement, blaring noise into silence just because he could. Parked sideways near a loading dock and jumped off, cracking his knuckles and looking around. 2 other bikers followed, parking beside him. They were his crew, Miles and Rick, but they weren't much better than background noise, followers, drifters. They didn't think too hard about anything. That's why Cody liked them around. Nobody challenged him. "What are we doing here again?" Miles asked, hopping off his bike and lighting a cigarette. "Nothing, man," Cody shrugged. "Just killing time before we hit Jack's bar later. I heard the girls from the strip club are coming through." "Nice," Rick grunted, kicking a can off the pavement. That's when Cody saw them, 2 scruffy dogs huddled near the wall, close to a rusted dumpster. One was a mutt, medium-sized, scraggly white fur, big brown eyes that looked too innocent for a place like this. The other was smaller, some kind of terrier mix, shivering like it hadn't eaten in days. They were pressed against each other like glue, tails low, silent. Cody grinned. "Oh, man," he muttered. "You guys want to see something funny?" Rick raised an eyebrow. "What now?" Cody walked toward the dogs, slow at first, then faster. The bigger one growled low, trying to protect the smaller one, but it didn't even get to bark before Cody hauled back his boot. The sound of his foot connecting with the dog's ribs echoed in the alley like a gunshot. The animal yelped, sharp and quick, then crumpled to the side, legs scrambling, breath shallow. The smaller one barked wildly and ran in circles, clearly panicked. Miles and Rick both laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that dies quick. Even they knew something about it felt off. "Come on, man," Miles said, half smiling. "You kicked it hard." Cody shrugged, eyes on the trembling terrier. "They're street rats, who cares? You ever see that video of the guy drop-kicking a goose? Got like 5 million views." He stepped toward the smaller one. That's when a voice cut through the alley. Quiet, but cold enough to freeze bone. "I care." Cody stopped. So did everyone else. The man who had spoken stepped into view from the end of the alley. He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. He wore a black, long coat, open just enough to reveal a fitted grey shirt and jeans that didn't hang like biker trash. Clean. Tactical. Everything about him screamed control, precision. He wasn't huge, but he was carved like something built for war. Muscles coiled under that calm exterior, eyes sharp, focused, cold. Cody didn't recognize him at first, which was weird. Usually he knew who was who in these parts. But this guy? He had the kind of presence that made you feel like you'd seen him somewhere before. Maybe in a nightmare, or a movie. "You got a problem?" Cody called, straightening up. The man didn't answer. Instead, he walked slowly, methodically, toward the injured dog. He knelt beside it, ran a careful hand along its ribs, then looked at the other one, still barking. Both dogs instantly calmed down. That's when it clicked. Rick's voice was a whisper now. "Dude! That's Jason Statham." Cody laughed. "What?" Miles didn't laugh. "I'm serious, man. That's him. From the movies. The Transporter. Expendables. You didn't see him?" Cody turned back to the man, and now he really looked. The face, the walk, the silence, the total control. His heart sank a little. Jason Statham stood slowly, his eyes locked on Cody like a scope finding its mark. "You think it's funny," he said calmly, "to hurt things smaller than you." Cody tried to bluff. "I didn't know they were yours. Does that make it better?" The silence that followed was louder than any roar Cody had heard. Jason looked down at the dog again. It was breathing, but shallow. Its ribs were definitely cracked. He looked up again. "You've got 5 seconds to leave, or I make sure you don't walk straight for the rest of your life." That was the moment it all shifted. Cody, for all his swagger, felt his legs twitch. The guy wasn't shouting, wasn't puffing up, he wasn't threatening. He was promising. And it wasn't bravado. This man had hurt people. You could see it in the way he didn't need to act tough. He was tough. In a way you only become by surviving things that would break normal men. Miles had already mounted his bike. "Cody," he muttered. "We should go." Jason hadn't moved. Rick backed away too. "Let's bounce, man!" Cody hesitated, just a second too long. Jason stepped forward. Once. That was enough. Cody turned, got on his bike, and gunned it out of there like his soul was on fire. Behind them, Jason crouched again, gently scooping up the injured dog in his arms. The smaller one followed, close at his heel, like they knew him. Because they did. He wasn't just some actor with an ego. He was a man who trained his own rescue dogs, the kind who built trust with animals broken by the world. And now, one of them was hurt, and the man who did it was still out there. Jason looked down the alley where the bikes had vanished, jaw tight. This wasn't over. The injured dog didn't make a sound in Jason's arms. Not a whimper, not a cry, just the faint vibration of its breath against his chest and the rapid beat of a heart trying to hold on. It was the kind of silence only an animal who'd been hurt before could muster, quiet, obedient. Like it had learned long ago that making noise didn't help, that yelping just invited more pain. Jason had seen that look before. He moved fast. The alley was still just rusted dumpsters, cracked pavement, and the distant hum of traffic beyond the warehouse blocks. A world too loud to notice a dog bleeding behind a trash heap. But Jason noticed. He turned the corner at a pace that wasn't quite a run, but far more than a walk. The smaller dog, trembling and alert, trailed at his heels. No leash, no command. It didn't need one. Animals like that knew instinctively when they'd found someone who would fight for them, even if it didn't understand why. His Range Rover was parked a block down, hidden behind a derelict billboard advertising a storage facility that had long since gone under. He reached it in seconds, opening the back hatch first, grabbing a thick fleece blanket from the survival kit. He wrapped the larger dog with it like muscle memory, sliding his jacket beneath its head, adjusting for comfort, never once breaking focus. Then he ran his fingers along the dog's side again, slower, more deliberate now. 2 ribs, maybe 3, not punctured lungs but close. It was breathing fast, too fast, and its eyes weren't focusing. He crouched lower and whispered, "Stay with me." The smaller dog whined. It hopped into the back seat before Jason even opened the driver's door. He slid into the seat, started the engine, and didn't wait for the navigation to finish loading. He knew where the emergency clinic was, on the east end, next to a tile showroom and a weed-choked parking lot, about 15 minutes out. Assuming nothing got in his way, Jason pulled out, like he was in a race. One hand on the wheel, one eye flicking constantly between the road and the rearview mirror. The dogs were quiet. Too quiet. The smaller one pressed close to the other like a shadow, refusing to let go. "You're not dying on me," Jason muttered. "Not now." He hit every green light like the city wanted him to win. When the traffic thickened, he slipped through gaps like a scalpel through skin. Everything about his movements was surgical, controlled, efficient. The kind of control you can't fake. The kind that comes from pain and discipline and choices you don't get to take back. People thought acting was what made him dangerous. They were wrong. What made Jason Statham dangerous was that he didn't act. He lived it. He trained it. He carried it in the set of his shoulders, the stillness in his hands, the unflinching way he met a threat without raising his voice. And now that instinct had a target. He glanced again at the mutt's shallow breathing. Every inch of him itched to slam the brakes and turn back, to hunt down that biker and make him pay in blood. But the dog needed to live first. That came before revenge. Always. The vet clinic was a squat brick building squashed between a gym that hadn't been open in years and a storefront with blacked-out windows. Jason slammed into the parking lot, swung the SUV into a spot near the door, and jumped out. He opened the back, gently scooped the larger dog into his arms, then walked through the glass doors, like a man who had just carried someone out of a war zone. The receptionist behind the counter didn't even get a word out. "Emergency," Jason said flatly. Her mouth opened, then closed. She recognized him instantly, but said nothing, just nodded and pointed toward the double doors. "Dr. Hannah's in surgery," she said quickly, rising from her chair. "But Mason's free." "Good." The doors opened without resistance. Jason followed her down a narrow hallway into a sterile, brightly lit exam room. It smelled of rubbing alcohol and adrenaline. Clean tiles. Cold metal. A man in scrubs appeared almost immediately. Tall, lean, about 50, with grey stubble and calm eyes. "What happened?" he asked, slipping on gloves. Jason laid the dog down carefully. Male, medium-sized. Kicked in the ribs by a grown man. Hard. Maybe twice. The vet didn't flinch. "How long ago?" 10 minutes. No longer. "Loss of consciousness?" "No." "Good. Let's get him stabilized." Jason stepped back, letting the man work. He turned to find the smaller dog had followed them in, sitting by the door, eyes locked on its friend. "You two stick together, huh?" Jason murmured. The smaller dog whined again. The vet worked quickly, hands on the dog's ribs, fingers pressing, checking for breakage and internal damage. 2 ribs are broken, maybe a third. No fluid in the lungs, that's lucky. We'll get him on fluids and give him something for the pain. "He'll make it?" Jason asked. "If he makes it through the night, he should." Jason exhaled slowly. That kind of breath that doesn't ease anything, just makes room for the next decision. The vet looked up again. "You said someone kicked him?" "A biker. Leather vest, crew patch, 2 others with him." "You get a name?" "Not yet." The vet nodded once. "I'll document it for the records." Jason handed over a black card. "Put whatever it costs on this. Don't hold back." The vet took it without comment. "We'll keep him overnight," he said. "Monitor vitals. Keep him warm." Jason nodded, then glanced at the smaller dog. "He's staying with me." The vet looked down at it, then back at Jason. "Understood." Jason turned and left the room without another word. He walked the dog back to the SUV, opened the front passenger door this time, and let the little one hop up on its own. The space the larger dog had filled now sat empty, just a folded blanket and the impression of a body that wasn't there anymore. Jason stared at it for a moment too long. He got in, started the engine, but didn't drive off. Not yet. Instead, he sat there, one hand gripping the wheel, the other rubbing his temple. His mind wasn't in the car anymore. It was in the alley, replaying it. Cody's laugh. The dull thud of boot-meeting ribs. The instant fear in the dog's eyes. He hadn't seen rage in that moment. He'd seen joy. That was worse, because rage was emotion. Rage meant something snapped. But joy, that kind of joy? It meant the damage was already there. Jason opened the glove box, pulled out a small notepad, and flipped it open. Inside were scribbled notes, plates, names, club insignias, things he saw but didn't say out loud. He wrote one more line. Biker, cobra patch, white beard, black and orange Harley, skull tattoo on right hand. Then he clicked the pen closed and set it beside the console. He'd find him. That part was easy. What came next wasn't. The drive back to Jason's home felt like moving through fog. Not from the weather, no, the skies were clear now, blue-grey and washed by the earlier wind, but from something thicker, heavy, personal. The terrier mix curled up in the passenger seat, curled tighter when Jason hit a bump. It hadn't made a sound since they left the clinic, but its eyes tracked every motion, every hand to the gear shift, every glance in the mirror. That kind of attentiveness didn't come from curiosity. It came from survival. Jason didn't talk on the drive, didn't turn on the radio, didn't run through scenarios aloud the way some men did when they were angry. He just drove, like a man who had already decided what had to be done. By the time he pulled into the driveway, the sun had begun its slow descent behind the tree line. Shadows stretched across the pavement like long fingers. His place wasn't flashy, single story, stone facade, tucked behind a gate that didn't scream for attention. Just a home. Quiet. Secure. That was all he ever needed. He killed the engine and got out, whistling softly. The little dog followed him out, hopped down, and waited by the door as Jason unlocked it. Inside, the house smelled like cedar and coffee, and something faintly metallic, tools maybe. There were weights in the corner, a canvas bag of tactical gear by the wall, and several framed photos on a minimalist shelf. A younger Jason with a Belgian Malinois at his side. Another with a muddy terrier mid-jump. One of him crouched down, hand extended to a scarred pit bull who was licking his knuckles. He knelt down and held out a bowl of water. The terrier lapped at it, then sat down with a small sigh. Jason tossed a thin blanket on the rug, and the dog settled immediately, like it had known where it belonged all along. Jason stood still in the kitchen, both hands resting on the counter. Then he reached over to a drawer and pulled out a small notebook, the same one he'd used in the car. He sat down, flipped to the page he'd started. Cody, skull tattoo, cobra patch, black-orange Harley, loudmouth. He added, Warehouse District, Tuesday afternoon, with two others, tall, pale, smoker, shorter, heavier build, shaved head. He stared at the ink for a moment, then opened his laptop. No search engine, no social media. Just a local message board hidden behind several proxy layers, a community used by stunt drivers, former security personnel, and the kind of people who didn't call 911 unless it was to tell someone what they'd already done. He typed, Anyone know a biker crew with a cobra patch, rides black-orange Harleys, seen in warehouse blocks near Fillmore Ave? 3 guys. One has skull tattoo on hand. Lead kicked a dog. I'm looking for names. Then he closed the screen. Jason didn't pace. He didn't mutter. He cleaned the coffee maker. An hour passed. The terrier snored softly on the rug. Then the reply came. Sounds like the Iron Fang chapter out of Eastbridge. Cobra's their second in command. Real name's Cody Riker. Been bouncing between bars lately, last seen at K-Bar, East End. Avoid if unarmed. Jason smirked. Unarmed wasn't the problem. He opened a locker in the hallway and scanned the contents. No guns. He wasn't a shooter by nature, too impersonal. But the knuckle gloves, those he slid on. He checked the fit, made a tight fist, and felt the familiar pull of worn leather and reinforced stitching. Then he pulled out a small pouch and opened it on the counter. Inside were photos, some of his dogs, yes, but others were different. Screenshots, surveillance angles, the kind of stuff he never posted online but always kept, not to remember what happened, to remember who caused it. He hadn't touched these in over a year, and now here he was. By 8:00 p.m., the sun had vanished. The house felt colder, the shadows longer. Jason stood in the doorway for a long time, staring at the terrier. "I'll be back." He wasn't sure why he said it. The dog wouldn't understand, but it still raised its head and watched him until the door shut. The K-Bar wasn't the kind of place you wandered into looking for peace. It sat behind a gas station, partially hidden by a line of trees and power poles. The windows were fogged, and the light above the door flickered like a dying firefly. Jason parked half a block down in the shadows, walked the rest of the way, quiet shoes, no visible weapon, just purpose. Inside, the air was thick with beer and ego. Bikers lined the bar. 2 men were playing pool in the back, and a jukebox played something that sounded angry but tired. He stepped in without hesitation, scanning once. There, near the bar. Cody. Same vest, same swagger, same skull tattoo on his hand as he tipped back a shot glass and laughed. Jason walked to the end of the bar and took a stool without saying a word. Didn't order anything, just sat, watching. Cody didn't notice him at first, but the bartender did. An older man with scars on both arms and eyes that had seen too much. He gave Jason a slow nod, not of welcome. Recognition. Jason nodded back. A minute passed. Then another. Then Cody turned, probably to grab another drink, and his smile dropped the second his eyes hit Jason's face. Silence slipped into the room like fog through a vent. Jason stood. Cody blinked. "You—" Jason's fist hit him before the word finished, leaving his mouth. Not a wild swing. A clean shot. Right into the ribs, the same side Cody had kicked the dog on. The air rushed out of Cody like a balloon punched in the gut. He stumbled into the bar, glass shattering around him. Everyone froze. Jason grabbed him by the vest, dragged him upright. "You want to hurt something weaker than you," he growled. "Try me." Cody swung, desperate and clumsy. Jason ducked it easily, slammed his palm into Cody's chest and swept his leg. Cody went down hard, coughing. Jason didn't go for a second punch. He didn't need to. "You don't touch dogs, ever. Again." Cody didn't answer, just curled in on himself. Jason looked around. "Any of you think that was funny?" No one moved. He turned to the bartender. "Call a medic. Tell him the idiot tripped." Then he left. He didn't run, didn't hurry. Just walked out the way he came, the night air greeting him like an old friend. Back home, the terrier was waiting by the door. Jason crouched, scratched its ears. "He'll be okay," he whispered. The dog licked his hand. And somewhere, in a clinic on the other side of town, a white mutt stirred on a heated table, heartbeat steady. Tomorrow, they'd all be together. But tonight, justice had been served quietly, one broken rib at a time. Morning came slow and gold through the tall windows of Jason's home. Light slipped across hardwood floors and up the wall like fingers reaching to pull the night away. The house was quiet, but not empty. The little terrier, now curled into the crook of an armchair, blinked against the light, yawned, then hopped down and padded softly to the front door. It sat there, alert, ears twitching, waiting. Jason was already awake, had been for hours. He sat outside on the back porch, hoodie pulled over his head, a mug of black coffee cooling in his grip. He didn't drink it for the taste. He drank it for the weight of it in his hands. The silence of morning always felt heavier after a night like the one before. He hadn't gone back to bed after returning home. Didn't need to. The house was safe, the dog was safe, and Cody was likely nursing a bruised rib and a wrecked ego somewhere beneath a pile of beer bottles and excuses. That part was done. But the story wasn't over. The dog from the clinic still waited, and Jason knew what it meant to wait alone. He stood slowly, stretched, then opened the door. The terrier jumped up instantly, tail wagging, a soft chuff in greeting. Jason crouched and rubbed behind its ears. "Time to go get your brother." The dog gave a quiet, high-pitched whine of agreement. The drive to the clinic was calm, the streets still half asleep. Jason liked it that way. No distractions, no horns, just space to think. He kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly on the center console where the terrier had curled up. The seat was lined with a new fleece blanket, clean, soft. No leftover blood this time. When they pulled into the lot, the front desk assistant from yesterday looked up and smiled warmly. "He's doing great," she said before he could even speak. "Dr. Mason will bring him out in just a minute." Jason nodded once and crouched beside the smaller dog. "You ready?" The tail wagged furiously. The door to the back opened, and Dr. Mason stepped through, holding the injured mutt in his arms, wrapped in blankets, but alert, awake. And when it saw Jason, its tail moved, slow but definite. Jason reached out and let the dog sniff his hand. The dog licked his fingers. Dr. Mason smiled. "He's sore, but healing. You got him here just in time. You've got good instincts." Jason's voice was quiet. "I've been on the other side. Too many times." Dr. Mason handed the dog off carefully. "He's yours, then?" Jason paused, looked at the two dogs. One curled into his arms, the other standing protectively at his knee. "Yeah," he said. "He's mine." Back at the house, the reunion was gentle but full of energy. The terrier sniffed and pawed at the recovering dog with concern, then delight licking his ears as he settled onto the rug. Jason brought over 2 bowls of food, light portions for the injured one, more for the smaller, and sat back, watching. The living room transformed in that moment. What was once a quiet space now pulsed with warmth. Not noise, not chaos, just life. Jason leaned against the wall and let himself breathe. He named the smaller one Rook, short for rookie, always alert, always watching. And the larger one Diesel, for his quiet power, his deep strength, and the way he'd taken a hit and still fought to stay. The names stuck. Over the next several days, they formed their rhythm. Rook followed Jason everywhere, always on his heels, his tiny paws clicking across the wood like a heartbeat. Diesel, still healing, spent much of his time curled near the fireplace or napping on the porch in the sun. Jason worked in silence. He didn't need music. The dogs were enough. He trained them slowly, no commands at first. Just presence, just consistency. A treat here, a gentle correction there. He wasn't trying to control them. He was trying to build trust. Trust was everything. Diesel, despite his bruises, was strong-willed. He didn't flinch from Jason's hand, didn't growl when his side was touched, but he didn't lean in either. Not yet. It would take time. Rook was different. Desperate to please, desperate to belong. The way his eyes followed Jason made it clear. This dog had been left behind before, and he wasn't going to let it happen again. On the 5th day, Jason sat outside, throwing a tennis ball slowly, short distances. Diesel watched from the porch at first, then slowly stood and limped over. When Jason rolled the ball toward him, he paused, then gently nudged it back with his nose. Jason didn't smile often, but he did then. Later that night, Jason received a message from a private number. It was short. "Cody's crew's been asking questions. Word is, they know who you are now." Jason stared at it for a few seconds, then deleted it. He didn't care. What mattered now was the space between this moment and the next. 2 nights later, while walking the dogs through the neighborhood trail, Jason heard footsteps behind him. Quick, soft. He turned slightly. 3 figures, hooded, close together, moving fast. Jason didn't panic, didn't run. "Home," he said, low and calm. Rook darted toward the house. Diesel hesitated, then followed. The 3 men didn't expect Jason to stand his ground. The first one rushed. Jason sidestepped, grabbing the man's hoodie and slamming him chest first into a tree. The second swung a metal pipe. Jason blocked it with his forearm, grunted at the pain, then kicked the man's knee sideways. He went down hard. The third stopped cold. Jason stared him down. "You here for a dog, too?" he asked. The man bolted. Jason didn't follow. He just knelt down, catching his breath as he listened to Rook barking from the porch. He walked back, slowly, bleeding slightly, breathing steady. Rook met him with wide eyes. "I'm fine," Jason whispered. "Told you I'd be back." The next morning, he drove to an animal rescue shelter on the other side of town. He walked through the kennels, Rook at his side, Diesel still too sore to join. He looked at every cage, every pair of eyes, some hopeful, some broken. He stopped at a kennel where a young staffer was cleaning the floor. "Who's that?" Jason asked. The staffer glanced up. "That's Tank, pit mix, found locked in a crate near the highway, scared of everyone." Jason crouched. Tank didn't growl, didn't bark. He just looked at Jason like he wasn't sure what to believe. Jason extended his hand through the cage. Slowly, no rush. Tank sniffed it, then licked it. Jason stood. "I'll take him." "You sure?" the staffer asked, surprised. "He needs a lot of work." Jason nodded. So did I. Tank wasn't what most people pictured when they thought of a rescue. He didn't whimper. He didn't shake. He didn't bark from the back of the kennel like the others did, begging for attention. No, Tank just sat, motionless. His eyes followed movement, but his body never moved unless it had to. Jason had seen that kind of stillness before. In fighters, in soldiers, in men who'd been hurt badly enough, that motion became a calculated risk. The shelter worker handed over the leash like it was a live wire. "He's okay around people," she said carefully. "Mostly, but other dogs he might react. It's just, he's been through some things." Jason gave her a steady look. "So have I." They walked out together, the sunlight catching Tank's reddish-brown coat. Scars lined his back like a map of pain. Not fresh, old, faded, but deep. Jason opened the back of the Range Rover. Rook sat already in the front seat, watching with alert curiosity. Diesel, still recovering, lay curled in a soft corner of the back with a protective gaze that hadn't left the world since his injury. Tank stopped at the open door. "Didn't move." Jason waited. He didn't tug the leash, didn't coax. He just knelt beside the dog, hands loose at his sides. "You come in when you're ready," he said softly. Tank blinked once, then twice, and after a long pause, he jumped up and lay down. Back at the house, the introductions were cautious. Jason kept Rook in the living room and Diesel on the porch as he brought Tank in slowly. Every step the dog took inside was hesitant, like he expected someone to shove him back out. When Rook barked softly from the other room, Tank froze. His body tensed like a tripwire. Jason crouched again, voice low. "No one's here to fight you." That first day, Tank didn't eat. He didn't drink much. He lay by the front door, head on his paws, staring like he wasn't convinced this was real. By the second day, he accepted food, only after watching Jason prepare it by hand. He ate slow, every bite chewed with caution. When Rook came near, Tank would look, but not growl. Just watch. And wait. Jason didn't force contact. He let them all find their pace. Diesel, still healing, didn't interact much, but from the porch he saw. And Tank saw him too. One afternoon, Jason left the door open longer than usual. The sun poured in, and the house filled with that late afternoon stillness that felt like memory. Tank rose slowly from his spot and limped. Jason hadn't noticed it before, but it was there, subtle and stiff, toward the back porch. Diesel looked up. Tank stopped at the doorway. Diesel didn't move. And then, tentatively, Tank stepped onto the porch. Jason, watching from the kitchen window, exhaled. A week passed. Jason trained every day, in the yard, in the woods nearby. He'd tie logs to ropes and drag them, do pull-ups on tree limbs, run the trails with Rook and Tank flanking him while Diesel stayed home recovering. He wasn't just keeping himself sharp. He was waiting. And sure enough, the waiting paid off. One night, a car rolled slowly down the street. Lights off, engine barely idling. It passed by once, then again. Jason didn't move from the porch, but he noticed. The next day, he took a walk with all three dogs, Tank on his left, Diesel slowly ambling beside Rook on the right. The trail was empty until the last bend, where a figure waited on a bench. Not a threat. It was Reuben, ex-Special Forces, retired. Now ran a self-defense school in the next town over. The kind of guy who saw a lot without ever saying much. He nodded once as Jason approached, words spreading. Jason sat beside him, dogs at his feet. "They know it was me?" Jason asked. "Yeah, and they're not happy. Word is, Cody's older brother runs another crew out of Ridgeway. Lot more serious guys, not just barstool warriors." Jason didn't blink. "They coming?" "Probably." "Good." Reuben looked at the dogs. "You sure about this?" Jason rubbed the top of Rook's head. They started it. Tank sat up straighter. Diesel's ears twitched. Reuben leaned in. "You ever gonna tell anyone why this matters so much to you?" Jason didn't answer. "Not right away." Then, "I knew a dog named Lex once. Belgian Malinois. We served together overseas. Took a hit from a grenade that was meant for me. Didn't make it." Reuben nodded. "I'm sorry." Jason's eyes stayed fixed on the trees. "I told myself I'd never let another one take the hit for me again." That night, the phone rang once and stopped. Code. Jason stood, grabbed the vest he hadn't worn in 2 years, fitted it over his hoodie, slid the knife into the hidden sheath on his hip, not for killing, for warning. He looked at the dogs. They were all watching him now. "You stay." Rook whined. Diesel lifted his head. Tank growled, soft, confused. Jason crouched. "If something happens, you run. You hear me?" He stood, opened the front door, and walked into the night. The abandoned warehouse at the edge of Ridgeway was a known meeting spot. Bikers used it for off-the-books, fights, deals, and everything in between. No security cameras, no police patrols. When Jason pulled up, he counted 5 bikes. One was Cody's. The others, unfamiliar, all modified, flashy, dangerous. He got out and walked straight in. Inside, the air reeked of sweat and oil. 5 men stood near the back. Cody was there, arm in a sling, bruised but trying to look tough. His brother stood beside him, taller, meaner, the kind of man who never smiled unless he was about to break something. Jason walked until he was 10 feet from them. "Thought I'd see you again," the brother said. Jason nodded. "Thought I'd give you a chance to stay out of it. You messed with family." "No," Jason said coldly. "Your brother messed with mine." Cody spat. "They're dogs." Jason stepped forward, his voice low and deadly. "And what are you?" That did it. The first man lunged. Jason sidestepped, drove his elbow into the man's neck, and dropped him with a sweep. The second swung wide. Jason ducked, landed a body shot, then a knee. The man folded. The third was smarter. He waited. Circled. Jason circled too. The room pulsed with tension. Then a bark. Sharp. Loud. Jason froze. The door behind him was open, and all 3 dogs stood there, Rook at the front, tail up, alert. Diesel beside him, limping slightly but fierce. And Tank. Tank's lip curled, his stance low, ready. Jason didn't tell them to come. They just had. The third biker took one look at the dogs and hesitated. Jason didn't. He moved forward, fast and final. A punch to the temple. Down. Then, silence. Cody and his brother were backed against the wall now, eyes wide. "Don't come near us again," Jason said, "or I send them next time." He turned and walked out. The dogs followed. Back home, Jason opened the door and let them all in. No words, just quiet breathing. Rook ran to the water bowl. Diesel lay down by the fire. Tank curled into a corner and sighed. Jason looked at all 3. "You're not broken," he whispered. "You're mine. You're home." It rained the next day. Not the violent kind. Not thunder and lightning. Just a steady, whispering rain that tapped gently on the windows and soaked the world in grey. The trees bowed under it. The grass shimmered. The earth seemed to breathe heavier, as if trying to exhale everything it had been holding on to. Inside the house, things moved slower. Jason sat at the table, a mug of coffee going cold in front of him, untouched. Rook lay beneath his chair, head resting on his foot. Diesel lay on the rug by the fire, still healing but stronger every day. And Tank? Tank now slept by the door, not because he was guarding it, but because he knew he didn't have to anymore. Jason stared out the window, eyes following raindrops racing down the glass. He wasn't thinking about the fight. That was done. Settled. No, what lingered now was something else. A quiet pull in his gut. A name he hadn't spoken in years. Lex. He stood suddenly, walked to a closet, and pulled down a small metal box from the top shelf. Inside were a few things: a folded patch, a photo, a worn leather collar with a broken clasp. Jason sat on the floor and laid them out in front of him. The photo showed a younger version of himself, crouched beside a sleek Belgian Malinois, both of them covered in dust, sun behind them, war on their shoulders. Lex's eyes were fierce but loyal, his stance alert. A protector. A partner. Jason ran his thumb over the collar's edge. It still smelled faintly of sand and sweat and sun. "I'm keeping the promise," he whispered. Rook looked up, ears twitching. Diesel stirred. And then Tank got up, just stood, walked over, and lay down beside Jason, his head resting near the box. Not a word, not a bark, just presence. Jason stayed there a long time. That afternoon, the rain let up. Jason opened the back door and let the dogs out. Rook darted through the wet grass, spinning in quick loops like a child on a playground. Diesel moved slower, testing his leg, walking a little farther than usual before laying down beneath a tree. Tank stood still in the yard, sniffing the air, turning his head like he could hear something Jason couldn't. Jason watched them from the porch. Arms crossed, eyes soft. They were different now. All of them. Rook had gone from nervous to curious. Diesel no longer flinched when the wind picked up. And Tank, he still didn't play, not yet, but there was something looser in his shoulders. Something almost peaceful. Then the phone rang. Jason stepped back inside, checked the screen. Unknown number. He answered, "Yeah?" A woman's voice. Calm. Professional. Jason Statham? Yes. This is Elena Ross. I run a rescue and rehabilitation center upstate Pine Haven. We work with dogs like yours, ones who've seen the worst and still wake up fighting. Jason didn't reply right away. She continued. Someone gave me your name, said you might be interested in what we're doing, not adoption, collaboration. Who gave you my name? There was a smile in her voice. Let's just say you've made an impression. Jason glanced out the window again, eyes scanning the yard. What kind of collaboration? Training, integration, healing. We run programs for veterans and at-risk kids. We pair them with dogs like Tank and Diesel. The results? They change lives. Jason's voice was low. That's what they're already doing. Then maybe it's time they helped others too. A pause. Come see it, she added. Bring them. No pressure, just a visit. Jason didn't say yes, but he didn't say no either. 2 days later, Jason loaded the dogs into the back of the Rover again. Diesel needed help getting in. He was still moving stiff, but he went willingly. Rook curled into the seat beside him, like they'd been riding together for years. Tank jumped in last. No hesitation. The drive took nearly 2 hours. Pine Haven sat at the edge of a vast stretch of forest land, flanked by mountains and lakes. The kind of place you didn't stumble onto. You had to be invited. Jason pulled up to the gate. A woman in jeans and a flannel shirt stepped out of the small booth. She was in her late 30s, sharp-eyed but warm. She raised a hand in greeting. Elena? Jason asked as he stepped out. That's me, she said, extending her hand. And those must be your boys. Jason glanced at the dogs, all alert in the back. They don't like to be left behind. They won't have to be. Eleanor led them through the grounds, past open fields, fenced-in agility courses, cabins, and a barn converted into an indoor training center. The whole place pulsed with purpose. Dogs of every size and shape worked beside humans, some in wheelchairs, some with prosthetic limbs, some just quiet and tired. But all of them were moving forward. We call it work, Elena said, but it's really about rebuilding for the people and the animals. Jason watched a teenage boy kneel beside a shaking hound, whisper something, then stand and walk beside it as it slowly followed. Your dogs, Elena continued, could change someone's life, you included. Jason didn't reply. He didn't need to. The look in his eyes said it all. They stayed the night. Elena had cabins for guests, clean, spare, private. Jason kept the dogs close, sleeping with the window open so they could hear the forest breathe. The next morning, he stepped outside with a mug of fresh coffee and found Rook sitting by the door, Diesel lying peacefully in the sun, and Tank was running. Not fast, not playfully, but forward, ears perked, tongue out, legs strong. Jason watched, stunned. And then Tank barked. For the first time since coming home, Jason closed his eyes. The sound was the loudest kind of healing. Elena met him at the edge of the field later. You've got something special here, she said. Jason nodded. I know. We'd love to have you come back, even part-time. Train with us, maybe lead some sessions, no pressure. Jason looked out across the grass. Diesel was walking with a little girl. She reached out and gently touched his scar. He didn't flinch. "Let me talk to the boys," Jason said with a smile. That evening, as the sun dropped behind the trees, Jason loaded the dogs back into the Rover. On the drive home, Rook curled up between Tank and Diesel, the three of them breathing in sync. Jason glanced at them in the mirror. Then, out at the road ahead. The fight was behind them now. What came next was the future. The old scars never really vanished. They faded, yes, softened by time and tenderness, but they didn't disappear. Not on Jason, not on the dogs. They just stopped defining who they were. By the end of the week, the house didn't feel like a place anymore. It felt like a team. Rook was quick to respond to commands now, sharp and eager, tail wagging at the slightest tilt of Jason's voice. Diesel had nearly healed, his limp barely noticeable, and had started running short distances on the trails. Tank had gone from cautious to calm, now walking beside Jason with a confidence that didn't need to be loud. The balance between them was quiet, sacred. Jason began rising earlier. Coffee in hand, he'd step outside while the sky was still an inky blue, the world not yet stirred. The dogs would come out behind him, one by one, sitting or lying nearby without a word. It wasn't about training. It was about trust. He was teaching them what it felt like to be safe, and in return, they reminded him what it felt like to matter. That morning, Jason received another call. Same rescue center. Elena's voice again. "I've got something," she said. "A boy, 16, foster system lifer. Gets bounced around like luggage, closed off, doesn't talk much. They're thinking about sending him to a facility." Jason leaned against the doorframe, mug cradled in his hand. "Why call me?" "Because he's not afraid of dogs, but he's afraid of people. I thought maybe your team might help." There was a long pause. Then Jason said, "What's his name?" "Elijah." The boy didn't speak during the first car ride. He sat in the back, hoodie pulled low over his face, knees pulled up like a barricade. Jason drove without music, the windows cracked just enough to let the forest air breathe into the Rover. Rook sat in the passenger seat, eyes scanning the road ahead, while Diesel and Tank occupied the back. Elijah didn't flinch when Tank's tail brushed his leg. Didn't move when Diesel let out a slow, contented sigh. But he didn't lean away either. Jason considered that a win. When they arrived, Elijah stepped out on his own. No prodding, just quiet observation. He looked at the house, the woods behind it, the porch, then at the dogs. Rook approached him first, tail low, not wagging, just present. Elijah stared at him for a second, then dropped to a crouch. "Hey," he whispered. That was all. But it was everything. The first night, Elijah didn't talk much, ate little, stared at the fire like he was afraid of what it might say. Jason didn't push. Instead, he tossed a blanket on the couch and nodded. "You sleep here. Dogs will keep watch." Elijah blinked. "They sleep inside?" Jason arched an eyebrow. "You don't?" The boy said nothing, but the tiniest curve of a smile ghosted across his lips. That night, Diesel curled beside the couch, Tank at the door, and Rook pressed into the small of Elijah's back like a sentry made of fur and heat. The boy didn't move the entire night. By the third day, Elijah had started shadowing Jason. Not talking, just trailing, quietly. Watching how he trained the dogs, how he cooked, how he walked the trails. He watched how Jason moved with intention, never rushed, never too loud. On the fourth day, while Jason cleaned a wound on Diesel's leg, Elijah spoke. "How do you know they won't bite?" Jason glanced up. "I don't. I just trust that they won't." "What if they do?" Jason gently wrapped the bandage. Then I forgive them and try again tomorrow. Elijah didn't answer. But later that day, Jason found him on the porch with Tank, gently brushing the old scars on the pit mix's back. The dog didn't move, just breathed. Elena visited again a few days later. When she stepped out of the car, she paused at the porch. Jason was working on a wooden training platform. Elijah stood nearby, watching, holding the tools. Rook and Diesel flanked the workspace, ears flicking. Tank sat beside Elijah like a quiet guardian. Eleanor smiled. He's changed. Jason looked up. He's not the only one. They sat under the shade later, watching Elijah and the dogs run in the yard. I want to start something, Jason said. Eleanor turned to him. What kind of something? Not just rehab. Not just rescue. I want to take the worst of the world and turn it into something that protects people. She raised an eyebrow. A program? Jason nodded. Dogs like mine, kids like Elijah, give them training, purpose, a mission. Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Name it. Jason didn't hesitate. Second Fang. That week, Jason registered the name officially. Set up paperwork. Ordered gear. Reached out to trainers he trusted. Ones who'd served. Ones who'd seen darkness and chosen to fight back with light. He remodeled the barn. Converted part of the house into a training wing. Built kennels, not cages, but open-air shelters that looked more like bedrooms than cells. And through it all, Elijah stayed. Helping, working, growing. Every night, they ate together. Every morning, they ran the trails with the dogs. Jason never said the word family. But he didn't have to. One morning, Elijah opened the door before Jason did. Let the dogs out. Fed them. Sat on the porch with Rook in his lap and Tank's head resting on his thigh. Jason stepped outside, coffee in hand. Up early. Elijah shrugged. Didn't want them waiting. Jason nodded, then passed him a second mug of coffee. It's bitter. I'll take it. They sat in silence. The kind that didn't need filling. A week later, Jason returned to the warehouse. Not to fight. To tear it down. He rented an excavator, loaded the dogs into the rover, drove out with no fanfare. The building stood as it always had, ugly, hollow, violent. Jason stood in front of it, staring for a long time. Then he started the engine. Steel collapsed like bones under pressure. Walls crumbled. Windows shattered. A decade of brutality reduced to dust and wind. When it was done, Jason stepped out. Tank walked beside him, kicked dust with his paws. Jason looked at the pile of rubble. No more ghosts, he whispered, and walked away. It had been nearly a month since Jason tore down the warehouse. Since then, the Second Fang project had begun to take shape. Not as an idea, not as a dream, but as something real, something rooted. The barn was fully renovated now, transformed into a functional yet calming training facility. The inside was lined with rubber flooring, a custom-built agility course, and walls filled with shelves of supplies, treats, harnesses, gear, and quiet hope. The word had spread quietly. No ads, no press. Just one broken soul telling another where to go when they had nowhere else. The first to arrive was a kid named Tyler, 14, shaved head, dark circles under his eyes, silent in a way that made even the air seem hesitant around him. He didn't talk when Jason met him at the gate. Didn't flinch when Rook came bounding over. Jason didn't ask questions. Instead, he handed him a leash. Let's start with a walk. Tyler took it without looking up. Inside, Tank trotted beside them like a silent chaperone. The second was a woman, late 30s. Her name was Shay, a former combat medic. Her hands trembled when she signed the intake form. Jason noticed, didn't comment. But when Diesel laid his head on her lap an hour later without prompting, she didn't pull away. By the end of the week, there were 4 people and 5 dogs moving through the Second Fang training field, each pair learning how to walk in step, how to breathe together, how to trust again. Jason worked non-stop. Not just with the dogs, but with the people. He taught them with quiet clarity, how to read body language, how to speak without shouting, how to correct with touch and tone instead of punishment. The rules were simple. No yelling, no raising hands in anger, no cages, and no one gets left behind. Elijah took to the role of assistant like he was born for it. He helped with feedings, shadowed Jason during intake evaluations, and took tank for daily confidence-building exercises. The boy who once barely spoke now knelt beside others, showing them how to wrap a leash or calm a trembling pup. And somehow, in the process of helping others heal, Elijah's own walls began to fall. One night, a storm rolled through the valley. Heavy winds rattled the windows, and the power blinked twice before staying out. Jason lit 2 lanterns and set them on the kitchen table. Elijah sat nearby, towel-drying Rook's fur after the dog had darted into the rain. "Do storms scare them?" the boy asked. "Sometimes," Jason said. "Sometimes they remember things we'll never see." Elijah looked at Diesel, who lay calm but alert by the window. "What about you?" the boy asked. Jason hesitated. "I remember enough." They didn't speak after that, but they didn't need to. 2 days later, a knock came at the gate. Jason looked through the monitor and felt something tighten in his chest. Cody. Not in a leather vest, not surrounded by his crew, just standing there, alone, in jeans and a plain hoodie, eyes lower than Jason had ever seen them. Jason didn't buzz the gate open. Instead, he walked out. Rook padded beside him, watching. Not aggressive, just ready. When Jason stopped on the other side of the gate, Cody raised both hands. "I'm not here to fight." "You sure?" Jason asked. "You brought a lot of that last time." Cody exhaled. "I got kicked out. After that night. The fight. The broken ribs. My brother said I embarrassed the crew." Jason didn't respond. "I've been staying in a halfway house," Cody continued. "One of the guys there knew your name, told me what this place is." Jason studied him. "What are you really here for?" Cody swallowed. "I saw what you did. With the dogs. With the kid. And I'm not asking for a handout. I want to be better." Jason didn't move. Didn't open the gate. But he said, "Come back tomorrow. Before sunrise. Alone." Cody blinked. "That's it?" Jason's voice was low. "That's everything." Cody came back. Right at 5:00 a.m. The gate opened for him this time. Jason handed him a rake. "The kennels need cleaning," he said. No ceremony, no welcome. Just work. Cody didn't complain. Didn't stop. And when Rook sat beside him during a break, Cody didn't flinch. He reached out, and Rook didn't pull away. By the end of the second week, Cody had started helping the others, quietly, patiently. It was Elijah who said it first. "He's not who he was." Jason nodded. "Neither are you." That night, Jason sat at the fire pit behind the house. The flames were low, the coals soft and glowing. Diesel lay with his head across Jason's boots. Rook was curled beside Elijah on a bench. Tank slept belly up in the grass, like he didn't know how to be afraid anymore. Jason stared at the fire for a long time. Then he whispered, "Lex, I kept the promise." And the wind answered with silence. The next morning, something strange happened. Jason walked into the training barn and found a letter on the workbench. It had no return address, just a single page. I heard about what you're doing. About the dogs. About the kids. I used to be like Cody. Worse, probably. This world breaks people. I never thought anyone could put them back together. But then someone showed me how. If you ever need help, look for the guy with the grey pit and the missing toe. We're out here, watching, grateful. Jason folded the paper, tucked it into the old Lex box. Then he stepped outside. The sun was rising, the sky was pink and gold and infinite. In the field, Elijah ran with Rook. Shay laughed as Diesel trotted beside her. Cody showed a younger girl how to clip a leash. And Tank sat in the grass, watching it all like a king who finally had a kingdom worth protecting. Jason stood there for a moment, just breathing. Then he whispered to no one, "This is what loyalty looks like." The wind was soft that morning, curling through the pines like a lullaby that had forgotten its own words. Birds whistled from somewhere deep in the trees. The gravel on the path crunched under slow, deliberate steps. Jason moved quietly through the property, sipping black coffee from his dented thermos. It was early, but the dogs were already up. Rook led the patrol around the perimeter, his self-assigned job. Diesel stretched on the porch, still stiff but stronger than ever. Tank lay belly up in a patch of sun, snoring with zero shame. A year ago, Jason couldn't have imagined this. Back then, he'd been alone, by choice, by design. The world outside had been something to avoid. People were messy, people betrayed, people hurt. But dogs? They stayed. Now, the world he'd built wasn't just a home, it was a movement. Second Fang had grown. It was no longer just a rescue or a rehab program. It had become a sanctuary, a place where pain had purpose, where rage learned discipline, where broken boys and battered animals learned how to walk again side by side. And on that morning, a new group was arriving. Jason had the file in his hand. He glanced at it again. Name: Marcus R. Age: 13. History: multiple homes. Aggressive behavior. Foster placement failed. Prefers silence. Loves animals. Notes: hasn't smiled in 6 months. Jason lowered the paper and looked toward the gate. The boy stood there already. Small. Thin. Arms crossed. Backpack clutched tight like a shield. Elijah met him halfway. He didn't talk much now during these moments. He just understood what a stare like that meant. He'd worn the same one once. Jason stayed back, letting the boy come in at his own pace. Marcus stepped inside the gate, eyes scanning everything. The barn, the open training fields, the dogs, the trees. His jaw was set, his shoulders stiff, until he saw Rook. The little terrier didn't bark, didn't run, just sat and stared. And Marcus stared back, then knelt. The moment was simple, small, but it echoed, because it meant the wall wasn't impenetrable. Not here. Later that day, Jason sat at his usual spot under the tall pine near the porch. Elena had stopped by, sipping tea beside him. "You've created something real here," she said. "Something the world needs more of." Jason gave a soft nod. "How do you keep doing it?" she asked. "You don't seem like a man who used to let people in." He was quiet a moment, then said, "I was good at fighting. That's what the world paid me for. But this teaches me how to stop fighting." She smiled. "That might be the bravest thing you've ever done." Jason didn't answer. Instead, he watched Marcus in the distance. The boy was sitting in the grass with Rook, tossing a ball. Not smiling, not laughing, but not hiding either. Elijah stood a few feet away, hands in his hoodie, watching the same thing. A generation teaching another. As dusk approached, Jason walked the field with Tank. The old pit was slowing now. His gait was a little stiffer, his grunts a little louder when he laid down. But his eyes, those battle-hardened, wolf-dark eyes, were sharper than ever. They reached the far tree line, where Jason had planted a marker last spring. Just a flat, square stone set into the earth. No name, no date. But he knew what it was. Lex. Jason crouched beside it. Tank lay next to him. "You'd like it here," Jason said softly. "All these strays. All these fighters." The wind stirred the pine branches. Jason reached into his jacket and pulled out a small collar, Lex's old one, faded leather, a broken clasp. He placed it gently on the marker. "No more cages," he whispered. "No more chains." Behind him, Rook barked once. Jason stood. Time to go home. That night, they lit a fire behind the house. Everyone gathered: Elena, Shay, Cody, Elijah, Marcus, and 2 more new arrivals. They sat in a loose circle, dogs scattered among them like guardians, like family. Someone passed a guitar. Someone else started a quiet tune. Nobody talked about their scars that night. They didn't need to. They were all visible. And yet, none of them defined who these people were anymore. Marcus leaned back against Elijah's side, half asleep, Rook curled between his arms. Diesel rested his head on Shay's knee, while Tank stood like a statue near the outer ring, always watching. Jason sat with a cup of tea he didn't usually drink. Not because he liked the taste, but because it was warm, because it was shared. Later, when the stars had come out and the fire had shrunk into embers, Marcus stood up. Everyone turned. He didn't say much, just 3 words. "Thank you, all." And then, for the first time in who knows how long, he smiled. It wasn't big, but it was real. Jason looked down at Rook, who seemed to nod without moving. And that was it. In the months that followed, Second Fang expanded. A new wing was built. A small van was donated. Jason's story, once whispered, started to spread, quietly, respectfully, not for fame, not for clicks. But because people needed to believe this world could still be kind, the program grew, but the mission never changed. 1 person, 1 dog, 1 moment at a time. Back at the house, the mornings remained the same. Coffee on the porch. Dogs circling the trails. Young hearts learning that loyalty had a face, and healing had 4 legs. Jason stood there often, hands in his pockets, watching them all, like a general who had finally won a war without drawing his sword. He never called it perfect. He just called it home. And for the first time in his life, he meant it. Fall arrived slowly in the valley, more of a suggestion than a declaration. The trees, once a wall of summer green, had begun to flirt with amber and rust. The mornings were sharper now, laced with chill, and the breath from the dogs fogged gently in the air during their early runs. Jason adjusted the porch lantern one morning, watching its flame dance against the wind. Rook had taken to waking before him now, a silent scout checking the property before the world had even stirred. Diesel moved slower in the cold, but steadier. Tank, though aging, still insisted on standing sentry during breakfast, like an old general overseeing the mess hall. The house was fuller than it had ever been. 7 residents now, and a waiting list. Each person had come through pain, some emotional, some visible, some both. But here, they weren't just cases or files or projects. They were a tribe. And Jason? He wasn't a rescuer anymore. He was a builder. It started that afternoon when Elena pulled up in her truck, her hair tucked beneath a cap, eyes tired but excited. She stepped out and handed Jason a folder. "You need to see this." He took it, flipping through the pages. Architectural plans, fencing extensions, a potential layout for a new wing, a larger dog field, therapy classrooms. "It's time to grow," she said. "And people want to help. We've got offers coming in. Land, equipment, volunteers." Jason looked at the final sheet. A projected cost. It was a big number. "I'm not asking you to turn it into a business," she added. "Just to accept that this thing you've made, it's bigger than you now. And it deserves space to breathe." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced out toward the tree line, where Marcus now walked with a young retriever named Scout, a dog who used to chew through cages and now stayed by his side without a leash. Jason turned back to Elena. "Let's build it." Construction began within weeks. Not flashy, not loud, just people with hands that knew how to work and hearts that understood why they were working. Jason helped pour the concrete himself. So did Cody. Elijah painted walls. Shay designed a therapy garden with walking paths and benches made from reclaimed barnwood. Tyler, the once silent 14-year-old, used a welder's mask to carve dog silhouettes into the steel gate they planned to install at the entrance. The new section would include 2 climate-controlled kennels for dogs in medical recovery, a space for group therapy and trauma debriefing, a dog-run obstacle course, and sleeping quarters for up to 12 residents. But the most meaningful addition was a wall. Not for division, but for remembrance. Jason called it the Loyalty Wall. Each person who completed their recovery and moved on would place a plaque there, with the name of their dog and a single sentence about what they'd learned. By the end of the first week, there were 4 plaques. Rook taught me how to show up. Diesel still limps, but he walks proud. Tank reminded us that some scars should be seen. Lex saved me before I knew I needed saving. Jason placed that last one himself. He didn't say anything during the ceremony. Didn't need to. Everyone stood silently. Even the dogs seemed to understand. One night, a letter arrived. Handwritten. No return address. Jason opened it at the kitchen table while the fire crackled nearby. "I don't know how to say thank you. But you saved my brother. He used to hurt everything, including me. Now he calls every week. Told me he's building dog runs, says he cries when Tank ignores him. I didn't think people like him could change. But you did. So thank you for saving my brother." Jason folded the letter, slid it into a drawer, marked kept. Rook hopped up into the chair beside him, resting his chin on the table's edge. "You believe in second chances too, huh?" Jason murmured. Rook thumped his tail in agreement. By early November, frost touched the fields in the mornings. Diesel had started sleeping closer to the fireplace again. Tank grumbled more when standing, but still refused to be left out of anything. Rook had become a therapy dog for the new arrivals, a job he'd appointed himself. And Elijah had grown. Not taller, maybe, but older, in a way only those who've suffered can. He now led his own sessions, using his voice sparingly but with weight. He'd earned his place here, not just as a student, but as a co-founder. "You're not just a survivor anymore," Jason told him one night. "You're a leader." Elijah nodded. "Because someone taught me to be one." The last person to arrive that year was a woman named Rachel. She had a sleeve of tattoos, a service dog with a PTSD vest, and the eyes of someone who had once pulled herself out of a burning vehicle while dragging someone else with her. Jason knew that. Look, he didn't ask about her past. He just introduced her to Shay. The two sat for hours that first afternoon, talking quietly while their dogs sniffed at one another under the table. By sundown, Rachel had asked to stay on as a volunteer. "You don't even know the rules," Jason said. "I don't need to," she replied. "I already know what matters." Thanksgiving came quietly. They didn't do anything fancy. Just a long table under the stars, dogs weaving between chairs, laughter cutting through the cold. Marcus made a terrible pie. Elijah made a perfect fire. Rook stole a turkey leg. No one was mad. Jason sat with a blanket around his shoulders, his eyes scanning the table. There were 10 people now, 9 dogs, and counting. It was chaos. It was peace. It was theirs. At the end of the night, as the last plate was cleared and the last laugh had faded into a yawn, Marcus approached Jason with a piece of paper. It was a sketch, crude, but recognizable. A man standing in a field, surrounded by dogs. Underneath it, Marcus had written one line. "You don't just rescue dogs. You rescue people who forgot they were worth rescuing." Jason didn't speak. He just reached out, pulled Marcus into a one-armed hug, and whispered, "Neither of us forgot now." Winter arrived like a whispered apology that turned into a promise. The wind no longer teased the trees, it wrapped around them, cradling the bark in silence. Frost painted the grass silver before sunrise, and smoke curled steadily from the chimney atop Jason's house, a steady heartbeat in the cold. The valley changed with the season, but Second Fang stayed steady. Not busier, not louder, just deeper. By mid-December, the new wing was functional. The firewood pile was stocked to the brim, and the generator hummed quietly behind the barn. Jason had prepared for a rough winter. Everyone had. What no one expected was that for the first time in many of their lives, the season didn't feel like something to survive. It felt like something to live through, together. Mornings began earlier. Coffee brewed before the sun showed its face, boots slipped on in the dark, and dog breath fogged the air in plumes of warmth. The younger residents rose first. Now, Marcus, Tyler, and 2 new boys who had arrived only weeks ago. They made it a game to see who could finish their chores before the others had even yawned. Jason didn't need to assign the tasks anymore. The structure was in them now. The rhythm had taken root. Feed the dogs, walk the perimeter, clean the kennels, brush coats, shovel paths. Repeat. It was quiet, purposeful work, and it gave shape to days that, not so long ago, had once felt too heavy to hold. Elijah had grown into a true leader. He now ran the midday group sessions, part walking therapy, part quiet confessions wrapped in dog fur and shared experience. He never forced anyone to talk. He just started with his own scars and let others decide what they wanted to carry out of silence. And Cody? He no longer flinched when someone called him good with animals. He accepted it now. Not with pride, not with shame, just acceptance. He knew who he used to be. But more importantly, he knew who he was choosing to be every day now. The dogs could sense the change. So could Jason. And yet, for all the peace, a familiar edge remained. The kind that never left a soldier. The kind that never truly let you forget what pain tastes like when it's fresh. It came back, in dreams, sometimes in memory. And one morning, it came back as a knock on the gate. It was early, not yet light. The gate camera flickered to life in Jason's room. A man stood outside, late 40s, worn leather jacket, greying beard, tall, still carrying the posture of someone who once barked orders and expected them to stick. Jason didn't recognize him. But Rook, at the foot of the bed, growled. That was enough. He dressed quietly, grabbed his coat, and stepped out into the brittle cold. The man didn't move as Jason approached. His breath hung in the air like smoke. His hands were in his pockets, not fidgeting, just waiting. Jason stopped at the other side of the gate. "You lost?" he asked. The man looked him over. "You Jason?" "I am." The man nodded once. "Name's Whitaker. I served with your brother. You knew him?" Jason stiffened. It had been years since anyone spoke of Jamie, years since he'd heard that name from someone who actually knew him. "I did," Jason said. "He died overseas." "I know," Whitaker said. "I was there." Jason didn't speak. His jaw clenched. "I didn't come to stir anything," the man added quickly. "I didn't even plan to stop. I was just passing through. But I heard about this place, and when I saw the sign—" He pulled something from his jacket pocket. A worn photo. Jason stepped forward and took it. 2 young soldiers, covered in dust, laughing. One was Jamie. The other, barely recognizable beneath grime and a shaved head, was Whitaker. Jason studied it for a long moment. "He used to talk about you," Whitaker said. "Said his brother was a fighter. Said if he didn't make it home, you'd be the one to carry the weight." Jason's voice was gravel. "I didn't carry it well. You're carrying it now." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Jason nodded toward the house. "There's coffee inside." Whitaker stayed 3 days. Didn't ask for a bed, but took one when offered. He helped fix a broken hinge on the barn door, walked the dogs, watched the training sessions like a man witnessing something sacred. On the second night, as the fire crackled in the main room and Tank dozed between them, Whitaker finally spoke again. "He saved me, you know." Jason didn't respond. "Your brother, in that firefight, pulled me out after I was hit. Took one in the shoulder himself doing it." Jason sipped his tea. "He never told me." "He wouldn't have. He didn't think it mattered. Said the only thing that did matter was making it home and doing something that counted." Jason looked into the fire. "He'd be proud of this," Whitaker said softly. "Of you." Jason didn't speak, but his hand reached down and brushed against Tank's head. Sometimes silence said enough. The next day, Whitaker left before sunrise. Didn't say goodbye, but left a note on the porch. "You did carry the weight. And you made it count. I'll see you down the road." Jason folded it, slipped it into the drawer marked kept, and stood by the fire until the dogs came to nudge him into moving. Winter deepened. Snow began to fall regularly. Light, dry, perfect for footprints. The dogs loved it. Rook bounded through it like a bullet with legs. Diesel tolerated it, limping with quiet resolve. Tank, despite the cold, insisted on sleeping with his face buried in it until someone called him back inside. Jason kept the fire going, built more food storage, added insulation to the training barn. Everyone pitched in. No one complained. They had survived worse than weather. On Christmas Eve, they built a tree from driftwood and pine cones. Marcus carved each dog's name into an ornament. Elijah painted them by hand. Cody wrapped bones in paper and tried to pretend he hadn't. That night, they lit candles instead of string lights. One for each dog. One for each person. One for the ones who couldn't be there anymore. The silence that followed wasn't grief. It was gratitude. It was peace. It was the sound of people who had learned the value of breath. Jason stood outside later, staring up at the stars. He thought of Jamie, of Lex, of the first time Rook followed him without a leash, of the first time Diesel lifted his head after surgery, of the first time Tank barked, of Elijah's first real laugh. He thought of Marcus curled up in a blanket beside Scout, and of himself, the man who used to walk alone because he didn't believe anyone could walk beside him without breaking something. Jason looked around. The house, The barn, the dogs, the kids, the snow. And he whispered, not to anyone, but to everyone. I stayed. Spring didn't arrive all at once. It crept in quietly, like it had been waiting at the edges for permission to bloom. The snow melted in patches, revealing damp earth and the earliest signs of life poking through. Green blades, brave and thin, but there. Second fang thawed slowly too. The routines didn't change with the season. The dogs still woke early. The people still rose before the light. Chores remained chores. The rhythm of care, of purpose, was stronger now than any cold the valley could throw. But the world felt softer, lighter. The firewood pile shrank. The sun stayed longer, and Jason found himself lingering on the porch in the early evenings, not to guard, not to worry, just to sit. Sometimes Elijah would join him, a silent presence on the bench nearby. Other times it was Marcus, sprawled with Scout's head in his lap, mumbling about whatever book he was pretending not to like. Rook was always there, curled at Jason's boots like the heartbeat of the house. One evening, Jason watched the field as the last of the frost melted from the tall grass. Tyler and Rachel were setting up a makeshift agility course with Cody. Shay laughed in the distance as Diesel stubbornly refused to jump through a hoop. Tank snored beneath the willow, one eye cracked open just enough to remind everyone he was still in charge. There was no music, just the rustle of trees, the thump of paws on dirt, the cadence of a place that no longer needed to be loud to prove it was alive. A letter arrived the next day, a plain white envelope, no stamp. Jason found it taped to the gate. Inside, a photograph of a new facility miles away, somewhere rural. Different, but familiar. Fencing, trails, a training ring. 3 men and 2 women standing in front of a banner that read, Iron Tails Initiative. At the bottom, scribbled in messy block print, we learned from the best. Come visit someday. Jason stared at it for a long time, then slid it into the drawer marked kept. Later that week, Elena returned, this time with a news crew. Jason wasn't thrilled about it, but she'd convinced him. It wasn't about fame. It was about showing what was possible, about proving that broken things didn't have to stay broken. That, even in a world that often forgot how to be kind, places like this could exist. They filmed for 3 days, quietly. No forced interviews. No setups. They watched Elijah guide a new arrival through Diesel's feeding routine. They recorded Marcus helping a shy pit mix through his first tunnel crawl. They captured Jason standing at the edge of the loyalty wall, reading every plaque, pausing only when he reached the one for Lex. They didn't ask questions about that one. They didn't need to. A week after the video aired, letters poured in. Not emails, not donations. Letters. From kids. From parents. From former soldiers and teachers and strangers who had carried silent pain for too long. Some asked if they could come. Others just said, thank you. Jason read every one. Then he built a new drawer in the cabinet beside kept. He called this one Seen. That spring, 3 more rescues arrived. A one-eyed German shepherd named Moose, found tied to a post behind an abandoned gas station. A deaf border collie named Echo, surrendered by a shelter who couldn't find her a home. And a limping mutt named Sarge, who had been left behind when his previous owner went to prison. Each was given space. Each was paired carefully. Each found purpose. Moose took to Elijah, following him like a shadow with teeth. Echo became Marcus's obsession. He taught her hand signals within a week. And Sarge, he chose Jason. Didn't ask. Didn't wait. Just followed. And Jason let him. One night, after dinner, Jason stood in front of the fire pit with the whole group seated around him, Dogs scattered between their people, licking plates, twitching in sleep. He didn't prepare a speech. He just spoke. Some of you were told you'd never get better, that you'd never be trusted, that you'd never come back from whatever broke you. He looked around. No one moved. No one blinked. But look at you now. He gestured toward the house. The barn. The dogs. This isn't just a rescue. It's a reminder that loyalty can outlast pain, that healing takes time, that family doesn't need blood, it needs presence. A pause. And that we don't get to choose the pain we carry, but we do get to choose what we do with it. He nodded once, then sat down. That night, the fire burned late. No one rushed to leave, and no one had to ask what came next. Summer arrived not with heat, but with laughter. More people came. Some stayed. Others didn't need to. Every dog found a job. Every person found a role. And the weight, the grief, the rage, the silence, they carried it together now. They didn't pretend it wasn't there. They just stopped carrying it alone. Jason still rose early. Still drank black coffee. Still wore the same coat. But there was a lightness to his steps now. A softness to the way he stood beside someone who was just beginning the journey. He didn't talk about the past much. Didn't need to. The house, the land, the dogs, they all remembered. And together, they moved forward. Not fast, not loud, but forward. Every single day, at the edge of the woods, just beyond the loyalty wall, Jason built a bench. Simple, unmarked, facing east. He sat there often, sometimes with a dog, sometimes with a person, sometimes with a memory, and always, always with the quiet that stayed.